What's up everybody, Coach Mills here coming at you with a brand new Valorant video, and in this video we're going to be breaking down 5 tips from one of the best players in the entire world and none other than T1 BRAX. He actually shared 5 of his tips for Valorant on Twitter, and we're going to break that down and then give you some more expansion upon these concepts so that you can really take some really awesome tips from one of the best players and start applying it to your game. But the GameLeap.com website is the best place if you want to rank up and start to pop off. We have tons of agent guides on the GameLeap website made by our top 100 player Tanner, so do yourself a favor, go check them out in the links down below. But without further ado, let's break down the video. Now, BRAX posted these 5 tips that are a combination of specific role tips and just general tips that are gonna help you just play much better in your games and improve. So let's break them down one at a time and see exactly what you need to do to start popping off. Now, for the first tip, he says, when playing a duelist, try to create as much space as you can by being in the front line when attacking a bomb site. It will make things a lot easier for your team if you can get them in a good position. Now, this is one of the most important things that you could be doing on a duelist, but the thing that I really have to clarify is what exactly space is, which is a concept that maybe not all of you understand. Now, essentially, space is room to operate in, room to move in. And imagine you're in a room, right? Or you're trying to push a site and you have no idea where enemies are. How far are you gonna move? Are you gonna be running across these sites or basically giving up all your information and just running around? No, you're not, because you have no idea where you're gonna get fired upon. But if a duelist uses ability and uses utility to clear out of sight, and you know that crossing through sight is not gonna get you killed, now you have so much more space to move to. You can now position yourself exactly where you want to, and you don't have to be afraid of every single step you take there's an enemy right around the corner. And this is what a duelist is supposed to be doing, and this is what space actually creates. Essentially, when you have no space, you feel claustrophobic and you're afraid of every single corner. But when you have space to operate, you can always put yourself in the best possible position, and you can make it so every single engagement is a favorable one. Now, moving on to the next tip that BRAX put down. Tip number 2 is, he says, try to warm up by playing Deathmatch or the practice range for 20 to 30 minutes before you play an official match. It's hard to know when you make a mistake if you miss your shots. And this really touches on something that I think is so important that a lot of people just don't understand. You see, when you want to improve at a game like Valorant, you need to identify when you're making a mistake. Did you position in the wrong place? Did you take a poor duel? And is that the reason that you lost? You see, learning from these mistakes is the best way to climb, and a lot of times death can be that reality check, like, hey, I made a mistake, I died here. Obviously, I made a mistake, but that's not always the case, because if mechanically you just lose even though you were in the right position or understood where the enemy was coming from and you still lost, that's because a lot of time you didn't have the mechanical skill to back it up, or you're just not warmed up. Essentially, while death should typically be an indication that you made a mistake, it's not always gonna be that way if you're always going into games when you're rusty or you haven't grinded that mechanical skill. The best litmus test for this typically is if you know an enemy is in a certain area and you know they're gonna swing and maybe they have no information about you, but you still lose that duel. That needs to be a reality check. Like, hey, I need to go grind more deathmatch, more practice range before I play another game, because I should have won that duel because I set it up properly. I was in a good position, I had good information, and I still lost it because of my rust and my mechanical skill and my lack of warming up. And just making sure that you always play when you're warm is gonna make sure that you always get to learn from these mistakes, because they're going to be actual decision-based mistakes and positioning and game sense-based mistakes, not mechanical ones or ones due to you being cold. Now, moving on to the next tip that BRAX really break down in his list. He says, if you have a big ultimate on agents like Breach, Killjoy, and Brimstone, you can retake on your site and use the ult to retake along with other available abilities. Now, this is like one of the #1 pro strategies that are being used all over the place, but players in ranked aren't doing this enough. A lot of these ultimates can allow you to retake so easily. Particularly Breach and Killjoy's ult can be so amazing to retake a lost site in a way that it's almost okay if you lose that site, because then the enemy plant, then you get to take that site back and put pressure on them to push into you, because you get to tap that spike and put pressure, that threat of defuse. Now, the reason that this is so important for you to understand is if you have these type of ultimates, these retake ultimates that are so damn powerful, you need to converse that to your team and talk about it and say, hey, can we play for retake this round? Don't hold your ground if enemies rush your point. Don't try to get trades or anything like that. Just back off. Let them have the point. Keep yourself alive so that you can help us when we invest these ultimates and play for the retake. This is such an important thing, and this is something that pro players get to do because they, of course, are all following the same plan and they're all going to play together. But in a random environment, unless someone like notices that you have an ultimate and calls it out ahead of time, no one's going to play like this. And then what's going to happen is the enemy's going to push on and kill 2 people. And then, yes, you have these retake ultimates, but still, it's going to be very hard to retake in like a 3v5. So that is one of the most important things that you need to understand. And I really love this tip because it really bridges the gap between like ranked play and pro play. This is really a pro strategy that pros are just basically using. They're just like, hey, we're gonna give up site and retake it, but the execution of it in ranked is not happening because players aren't realizing that this is what they should be trying to do from the get-go until it's far too late and they're like, oh, I'm just gonna pop this ultimate, and you know, they didn't even talk about it ahead of time. Now moving on to the next tip that BRAX actually broke down in his list. He states, when playing lurker agents such as Cypher and Killjoy, you should make sure your team can't get flanked with your intel while trying to find openings based off of rotations. Now, at the primary level, the first part of this tip, he's talking about just using like traps and of course Killjoy turret to prevent enemies from flanking. And now, especially in pro play and in high level ranked, you're seeing less and less flanks because they're extremely risky when your position gets known, when the enemy always has some sort of anti-flank in Cypher or Killjoy. And that's why they're pretty much super necessary, especially on maps where flanking is premium, like Haven, for instance. Now, the second part of this is also incredibly interesting, and I want to break it down so you understand how to get value from it. So he's talking about finding openings based on rotation, and this is one of the most important things that you could be doing on a Sentinel type character to really carry the game, because a lot of players that main these type of characters don't feel like they have as much impact as a duelist, but realistically, if you set up proper cutoffs and gather the information required to basically cut off an enemy from rotating, you can get like a 2-3k, or just shut down an enemy's rotation and then come back to your team. And depending on who you killed, it could be extremely difficult for enemies to retake a site, especially if the person you killed was someone that was pushing up first, like a duelist, who they really needed his abilities to take back site control. The best way to really do this though is you have to be thinking about where enemies are rotating to and taking in every single bit of information that you're kind of accessing. When you see an enemy use an ability on one site, when you see footsteps or your teammates get line of sight, and you know enemies are in certain other places, you can systematically put yourself as a cutoff where you know an enemy is going to probably rotate as your team pushes in, but you're there to cut them off and get that free kill. And then of course you're going to route back to your team. You're not going to continue that flank because that element of surprise is so important, but you already got such important value in that cutoff. And that's why Cypher and Killjoy players, if you can master this lurking style, you can carry so many different games, and it's incredibly important. Just watch players like BRAX and Cypher absolutely pop off on these roles. And if you want to see an in-depth breakdown of BRAX, definitely let me know in the comments down below, because he's an absolute god on characters like these. Now moving on to the last tip that we got to break down from BRAX's list, and he says this: try to learn every agent you can. When you know each agent's strengths and weaknesses, they become a lot easier to play against. Now, this is a big problem that happens a lot, where players will go play up against a character and they don't even really know that character's kit. It is your responsibility to learn every single character, at least at a basic level. I would highly suggest at least playing a couple of games on every single character, but probably more than that, not to master these characters and be able to flex to them, but just to understand what this character can do, what makes them strong, and different things like that. And also watch different streamers when they're playing different agents so that you can really get a grasp of some of the setups and strengths and weaknesses of every single agent. Now that being said, however, what is one of the most important things that you could be doing if you want to master your select agent that you main is understanding how its strengths interact with some of the best agents in the game. Like for example, let's say you're playing Raze, right? And normal characters will typically try to shoot your boom bot, right? When you throw your boom bot out and you swing the corner and they're gonna shoot that boom bot, and you're gonna get an opportunity to actually get a kill on them. But if you're up against a Jet, and a really good Jet, and you try to boom bot and swing the corner, she could hypothetically not shoot the bot and headshot you, and then dash away and not tank the explosion, which is something that a lot of characters wouldn't be able to do. The same thing could be said with a character like Reyna. And just understanding a lot of these little micro interactions between the characters and how that can just change slight things in each and every matchup can make you really make the smartest decision or play every single matchup appropriately, instead of just doing this cookie cutter one size fits all that can get shut down by the specific strengths of an enemy agent. Now anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video and learned a thing or two from BRAX. Make sure you go check out his stream because he's a freaking god tier player that plays for T1. And if you want to see more in-depth breakdowns, definitely go check it out on the GameLeap website and the links down below, where we have in-depth VOD reviews, advanced tips and tricks, and much more. Do yourself a favor, go check it out right now. But thanks so much for coming by. That's all we got for you today. I'm Coach Mills, and of course, until next time.